Good afternoon, and welcome to today's SAMHSA-sponsored webinar titled Informal and Formal Family Peer Support: The Impact and Evidence Presented on behalf of the National Federation of Families and the National Alliance of Mental Illness, also known as NAMI. Today's presentation will be recorded, and the recording link, slides, and a certificate of attendance will be sent via email to everyone who attended today. Closed captioning is available and can be viewed by clicking the CC icon at the bottom of your screen or by clicking the link in the chat pod to view in a separate window. We also have an ASL interpreter who should be spotlit on your screen. During the presentation, please add your questions and comments into the chat box, and questions will be asked out loud for presenters to answer at the end of the presentation. When the presentation ends, please take a few moments to complete a brief survey that will show in your browser as you exit the platform. Thank you again for joining us, and we will now begin today's presentation.
Thank you so much, Kayla. We are so excited to be here with you today. If you could go to the next slide. We're going to be talking about the difference between informal and formal family peer support. And it's just so wonderful to have the National Federation of Families and the National Alliance on Mental Illness here together to share their perspectives on what family peer support is. We want to also talk about how getting access to family peer support can help increase equity for those families that do have that lived experience of parenting or providing caregiving for a child of any age with mental health or substance use challenges. We're going to hear some really great research as well about the implementation and impact of NAMI Basics, which is an evidence-based family peer support program. And we're going to learn about research around all different types of family peer support as well, and why it's such a key element to have that family peer support when folks are recovering from mental health and substance use challenges, including serious mental illness and emotional disturbance. Next slide. I'm really excited for you to hear from these 5 wonderful speakers. First up, we have Kyler and Crystal DeGraff. They're our lived experience experts, and they're going to share their story of parenting a child with mental health challenges and how that led them to family peer support as a really essential part of their journey and how they became involved in that as well. Next, we'll hear from the Chief Executive Officer of Tennessee Voices, Ricky Harris, who has worked alongside Kyler and Crystal as they've learned more about the family peer support workforce. Ricky's going to really take us through what Tennessee Voices does as a family-run organization that helps employ family peers doing formal family peer support. Next, we'll hear from Terry Brister, who's the Chief Program Officer of NAMI, and she was essential in developing NAMI Basics, one of NAMI's key programs related to family peer support. And we have Kimberly Hogewood on with us as well to talk about her evaluation of NAMI Basics and her research in the family peer world. She is a professor of child and adolescent psychiatry at the New York University, and she's going to share her expertise with us as well. I can't wait for you to hear from all these folks, and we hope to have some time at the end of our presentations for a live Q&A session. Even if we don't get to those questions, we will have answers from our presenters sent out. So throughout today's presentations, go ahead and put your questions in the chat, and I'll be recording those for after the presentations are done. And I don't want to take any more time away from Kyler and Crystal's wonderful story, so I'm going to pass it right on to them with the next slide.
Thank you. We're so grateful to be a part of this. I'm Kyler, and this lovely lady is
Crystal.
And we're going to tell you about how SOCAT and family support helped us and our family. Luke is our 9-year-old son, and he is our entire world. And if you were to ask us today if we knew Luke as a baby was going to have struggles, we could tell you many stories. But we never guessed at age 4 he would be diagnosed with autism. And later on, he would be diagnosed as well with OCD, ODD, ADHD, and anxiety. As a baby, Luke had many challenges, but looking back, we could tell something was different. He was hard to soothed when he has a baby. He loved playing alone, and his body, he did things with his body that we now know was him stimming.
Um, Most parents have moments when they have kids when their children are either playing or resting, and you take that moment and soak that in and develop a core memory. And we have so many of those with Luke. And we are so grateful, and we were so lucky to have been blessed with such a sweet boy. With that, we do think about all the challenges that we have had in the past years and all the challenges that are to come. We also think how extremely thankful we are for the growth that our family has done. We moved here to Tennessee in 2018, and we placed Luke then at 3 in a preschool. Luke struggled. He struggled with self-regulation, communication, and its behavior. We were able to get Luke evaluated pretty quickly at Vanderbilt, and it was determined that he was on the spectrum. As a family, that diagnosis was heartbreaking. Not having the knowledge or the education or the direction to get the help that was going to be needed was an added pressure all along, trying to help Luke with his behaviors and needs. We spent many nights not sleeping, worrying, frustrated, but researching everything. I stayed up nights because I know now that was part of my grieving process. Looking on the internet for any piece of the puzzle to help Luke and to help us as a family. What we learned was there's tons of information out there, good, some not so good, but the resources or the ability to navigate those resources are minimum. We found an ABA clinic, and Luke attended that for a year, and things were a little better. And then COVID happened. And we all know COVID took away so many things. Months without support and a place for Luke to get the help that he needed landed Luke in a position where his eloping increased into unsafe settings. His behavior became extremely aggressive. And as a family, we were at a breaking point. It took a toll. Lack of sleep, feeling of failure, and downright emotional pain will destroy a family, and it almost did. We once again went to his doctors and begged for help. And then we were referred to SOCAT services through Tennessee Voices.
At first, Luke wanted nothing to do with the 2 strangers that came into the house to make changes. With repetition, education, and compassion, our family support specialist, Athena, and our care coordinator, Carrie, eventually won Luke over and was able to engage with him. As a family, we learned coping skills, the whys of Luke's behaviors, redirecting skills, and more than anything, receiving compassion and understanding from someone dealing with similar journeys. We are forever grateful for this.
Sorry, my emotions. I have to get my notes. Luke is a happy 9-year-old boy who loves Pokemon, race cars, music, and of course, video games and Legos. He is also a 9-year-old boy who continues to have challenges. Through the resources, through SOCAT's program, provided Luke a family that now has the confidence and some education to help him through his journey.
Daily challenges still exist. he is no longer the boy who would eat the pool noodles on his sensory swing that we had there for safety so he didn't hit his head on it. He no longer is that boy. And
That's what Athena and Carrie, that was our first encounter.
Yeah.
They got to meet him eating poo noodles. I'm sorry, guys.
our journey is exactly that, ours.
As parents with a child with mental health needs, we have learned not only how difficult it is to navigate, to find resources, but we as individuals have found out how important it is to take care of our own mental health. While helping Luke, we had the opportunity with SOCAT's services through Tennessee Voices to improve our own mental health.
We are so thankful for the resources like SOCAT from Tennessee Voices. And honestly, we don't believe we would be where we're at now without that help from SOCAT that helped us on our journey, which included me to actually decide to become a family support specialist with Tennessee Voices. This became one of my most rewarding accomplishments and opportunities, is to be able to go in and help other families navigate their journey and their struggles. And we just want to thank y'all so much for listening to our story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyler and Crystal. You guys are amazing. I am so proud to have you on board at Tennessee Voices and part of our work. I'm Ricky Harris. I'm the CEO at Tennessee Voices, and I get the great pleasure of working and leading staff like Kyler, who have families like Kyler and Crystal, who know exactly what it's like, so that when they're helping the families that come to us for services, they're helping from a capacity that is much greater. Their compassion, their understanding, their knowledge of the system, it's all personal, and it adds so much value to the services that we have to offer. We believe in it. It's the core of our work at Tennessee Voices. And my job today is to give you a quick overview of how we at Tennessee Voices utilize family support specialists, utilize peer services in our system, and how much we believe in peer services and advocate for those services, both at individual and system levels. I'll start by telling you that I got into this work like many of us. I would imagine many of you on the call have the same passions for this work because it is personal to you. I grew up in a home of 5 kids and had a sibling who was diagnosed with bipolar disorder as a child, and watched my family go through that during a time when there was very little help for families struggling through this situation. And goodness, I know I watched my parents cry a lot, Crystal. So don't ever be, apologetic for those tears. We had such a hard time as a family finding the help we needed. And I'm so lucky today to have entered the field and be able to help other families navigate through those same situations. I also have a child who has anxiety, and I too had to navigate that whole situation and the system in that process. And I leaned on my colleagues at Tennessee Voices many years ago to help me create a plan for her, which has been extremely successful and helpful. So I have a giant sized heart and respect for people who are professionally providing peer services. And I'm very proud of the work that we get to do every day at Tennessee Voices. So I would like to share a couple of things with you about how we do that work and what that looks like on a day-to-day. I'll set the tone by saying that Tennessee Voices has the opportunity to provide the family support specialist competency training to the people in our state who are pursuing a certification as a professional in the family and peer support realm. And so we get just a beautiful picture. We get the pleasure of seeing all the people in our state who have lived experience and are looking to become professionals in the field. And because of that and that long history of working with peer professionals, we have developed a statewide coalition, a gathering of family support specialists who work to continue to advocate for peer support and advocate for professionals that are doing the work that they're doing. And our state has grown tremendously with peer support specialists, particularly family support specialists. So our coalition now is fully led and run by the members of the coalition who are people with lived experience. We believed so much that in order to, well, walk the walk, it was best for us to create a coalition that was self-guided and self-led by people doing the work. So it's been amazing, and they actually helped put together these slides describing what it looks like to do peer support work. Oftentimes, part of the process in teaching and training and helping people learn how to use their lived experience is helping them learn how to talk about their lived experience and when to talk about their lived experience. Learning how to work with families, but also share a part of yourself, is a very unique and distinct opportunity and skill. So in our trainings, we're able to guide and help the family support specialists learn how to bring themselves at the right time into the process to help families feel a little less scared and make things feel a little more normal and be able to connect in a way that is absolutely unique to a person who can say, I've walked in your shoes. I apologize, my slide is taking just a moment to move here. There we go. As a family support specialist, our role is to advocate, support, coordinate care, and to also continue to pour back into our field. So we invite all the family support specialists that we know are working in Tennessee to be part of our coalition, whether they're an employee of Tennessee Voices or not. We believe in the value of gathering peer support specialists to continue to talk about and work on and advocate for their field. We also are here to educate caregivers, to provide anything that we can to help them have the tools in their tool belt to help families. And then we take on a lot of different roles. Not every family support specialist does the same exact thing or has the same exact title. Some are support group facilitators, some are trainers, some are providing direct care in a family's home one-on-one. And we also have opportunities for people who include employment and volunteerism. We work in our competency training on the following competencies for our peer support specialists, our family support specialists. Their role is to affect change, and that change is guided by the family's goals. It is very important to us that we do not direct the path a family chooses to go. The outcome should be defined by a family for the family, and it's our job to help them get to where they want to go. We also have professional responsibilities, and I'll talk about some of those on another slide. And then we want to make sure we help them navigate the system. Earlier, when Kyler and Crystal referenced SOCAT, SOCAT is one of our system of care programs that is part of our state in Tennessee, and we at Tennessee Voices are one of the providers, but there are many in the system. And it is very important in system of care programs to ensure system navigation. For us in Tennessee, we're very fortunate that the system is a bit easier to navigate because we have about 25 years of system of care funding in our state that has helped us over time get better coordinated. But we know that for a person who's just now learning what the opportunities are in the system, it is a lot to navigate. So it's our job as a family peer support to know what the opportunities and resources are and to make sure the family is fully informed. We also want to make sure that we're focused on wellness of the whole family. As you heard Crystal say earlier, working with Tennessee Voices, family support specialists and staff gave them an opportunity, gave Kyle and Crystal an opportunity to work on their own mental health. If you all have had a child go through anything like what they described, you know this is very stressful as a parent, and this takes a toll. So we look to make sure that we're providing opportunities for the entire family to get the help they need as they navigate a very complex and difficult situation. When we're working on affecting change, we want to make sure that we are being collaborative. Our job, we believe at Tennessee Voices, is to connect the system for the purpose of the family's success. And so we don't work in a silo. We know a lot of folks, we have a lot of friends, and we develop a lot of partnerships with other people working within the child serving systems and the family serving systems to ensure that whatever the family needs, whatever they're asking for, that we have opportunities to connect them. And we don't want to just say, here's a phone number, give them a call. We want to actually know the providers, make a phone call, give a warm handoff, and then follow up because we have a relationship with those providers in our network. This is one of the great things about our state's history with system of care work, is we all are very familiar with each other and have worked hard at keeping connections within the system. We work on our professional responsibilities. We obviously at Tennessee Voices have our ethics and our confidentiality and our boundaries trainings. We make sure that staff who are working in a role of family support feel that they've been well equipped to work within the system alongside other professionals. So we want them to be respected, and we want them to be equipped and ready for the field. I made mention of system navigation, but just to reiterate, there are so many pieces and parts of the system. This is one of the most important pieces of the job of a family peer support, is to know what all the resources are, what the systems are, and how to navigate and connect throughout multiple systems. So this is a bit of a journey. This is a journey with each family because each family has unique challenges and unique needs. When we take the approach of wellness and resiliency, we're looking at the entire family system. We believe, and I will say this is personal to me because I was the sibling of a brother in my family who had very severe mental health needs. And the focus was getting him the help he needed. But there were so many times as a child with my siblings that we felt lost, confused, concerned, and uneducated. And so I have such a personal passion for ensuring that families are cared for in the process, that we're not focused or over-focused on the identified client, but that we're focused on the system and helping everyone in the system get help and get support. This is why informal support is so critical. Speaking of informal support, we make sure that we connect all the natural support systems within the family. We are really, really great at helping a family think about their community, because often families get lost in this challenge, and often families get embarrassed to talk about it because, and I hear this all the time, families think, parents think, this is a reflection on me as a parent. And I'm here to tell you, you probably already know, it is not. This is not a reflection on parenting. This is a process that we at Tennessee Voices believe that we can help you navigate, and we want to walk alongside and partner with you, and blame has no place in going through this complex situation. Our family support specialists are well-trained on adverse childhood experiences. Now, I will not spend time on that piece in this training because that's not what my part is about, but I just wanted to provide this brief slide that we use in our FSS competency course to help our family support specialists understand how important and what role ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, play in some of these challenges. So advocacy and peer support are very connected. We have a job both as advocates for individual families and a job as advocates within the system. So we are connected through our work to both lawmakers and people who are working in our state to inform and educate on the role of family support. But then we're also very focused at an individual family level on how to help them learn to advocate for themselves and their families to get their needs met. We have a crisis system in our state that is very robust and continues to grow. And even now, we're growing our child crisis system through kids crisis stabilization. We have mobile providers, we have 988, we have lots of ways to connect our families to crisis help, but we want to make sure there's 24/7 opportunities for families to reach out, to be supported, and to get help in a crisis. And crisis is part of a very important part of the system of care for children in our state. We work very hard to empower our family support specialists for advocacy. And so we ensure that they are educated and know all of the mandates and rules and specific systems, that they're able to connect those rules and laws to what parents need and want, and they can develop a plan to journey through to get to the outcome that the parents desire. I'll leave you with this quote that the coalition put together. Family support specialists are personally invested, collaborative problem solvers with lived experience, stated in a SAMHSA presentation about peer support. We are incredibly grateful that the people who make decisions for our state and for our nation are understanding the value of lived experience and understanding how valuable it is to engage families when they are able to sit across the table from someone who has walked in a very similar path that they are walking. I cannot tell you how passionate I am about the work of family support specialists, and I want to thank you for your time. And I will hand it over to Dr. Brewster.
Thank you so much, Ricky. And thank you, Kaylin and Crystal, for sharing your story. And you're going to hear from Dr. Hoagwood shortly. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this panel. And Ricky, you don't have to say out loud or say verbally specifically how much it means to you. It's obvious how passionate you are. And I think you'll hear that from everybody on the presentation today. And my guess is everybody that's listening in as well. We're here because we care. Our CEO at NAMI says, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So with that said, I'm Terry Brister. I'm the Chief Program Officer at NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And what lives in my shop at NAMI are all of our education and support programs, our support groups, our classes, presentations, those types of things. But before I get into what I do at NAMI, I want to tell you about who I am. I refer to myself frequently as a recovering clinician. I worked in community mental health centers for a number of years. And after about 20 years, I found myself volunteering at NAMI while I was working on my doctorate and realized just how much I didn't know and what a better job I could have done as a clinician and an administrator if I had been looking through the lenses of a family member, which I am. I'm a mom, I'm a sibling, I'm a grandmother, I'm the daughter of people with mental health conditions, various flavors, various diagnoses. And I've lived with depression most of my adult life and looking back probably in my adolescent years as well. But I was trained not to think about all that. I was trained to put myself up and focus only on clinical boundaries, all those wonderful things, which we know now, thank goodness. how important it is for clinicians and for everybody who's working with individuals and families to be open to what we need. And what Ricky was talking about, everything should be person-centered. It's all about the person who's experiencing the challenges as well as their family members. So again, I know somebody's going to let me know when I run out of time, so I better move on. Next slide, please. One of the other things Ricky talked about was helping navigate. And you can tell I have a Southern accent, a little thicker than Ricky's was, but I'm in Mississippi. I'm frequently jealous of the services that are available, especially for children and adolescents in Tennessee. And one of those services I'm frequently jealous of is Voices. They do amazing things, helping family members navigate what can be a journey full of hurdles. I started to say a challenging system, but there's really not a system, which is what makes it so challenging. NAMI's another piece of that puzzle. We collaborate. It takes all of us. When Hillary Clinton ran for president all those years ago, she talked about it taking a village to raise a child. It really does take a village to support someone with a mental health condition, whether it's an adult or a child. And at NAMI, we have 4 what I refer to as buckets, pillars, whatever you want to call them, but we do 4 different types of work. We provide education. We provide basic information about mental health conditions, what they are, what they aren't. How do you get a diagnosis? What does the diagnosis mean? We also provide support through support groups, through our helpline, and through a variety of other ways, helping people navigate those journeys, making connections for them to places like Voices, to places like the National Federation of Families. We don't believe at all that we have all the answers at NAMI. What I tell people frequently is I know people in organizations that can help, and it really does take being able to connect the dots. We also do advocacy and awareness, general awareness about mental health conditions for the general public, schools, that type of thing, and advocacy at the national and the state levels. We have 650 different organizations across the country. There is a NAMI state organization in every state except North Dakota, and about 600 or so affiliates or chapters across the country. So there may not be a NAMI where you are, but there's one near. And I try to describe us as kind of a spider web across the country. And we see ourselves as providing support for not just the individuals experiencing the challenges and the family. And we mean that in the very broadest sense of the word. Family might mean a parent, it might mean a grandparent, it might mean someone who has guardianship if it's a child or an adolescent. It might also be the next door neighbor of an adult who doesn't have any relation close by, but there's almost always somebody, at least one person in each individual's life that helps provide support for them. And we try to help support those individuals so that they can provide what the person navigating the journey needs to get through it. If you go to the next slide, please. I want to talk specifically about our education programs. My component of this, I probably should have led with it, is about informal peer support. You're going to hear Dr. Hoagwood shortly talk about the research around formal and informal. What I'm going to tell you anecdotally is I think we need all of it. I think we need as much support as we can get from as many sources as we can get it. But I want to talk to you specifically about the type of informal support that's available through NAMI. And I'm going to build it around one of our programs, specifically NAMI Basics, which I'll get to in a minute. But we have general core values that I want to share with all of you. And you see some of them listed on the slide, which aren't going to surprise you. Personal experience is at the forefront. NAMI was founded in started in 1979 by a group of parents moms and dads of adults with schizophrenia who weren't getting what they needed from the system. They started getting together just to figure out, how do we get what we need when we're not getting it from the healthcare system? And it evolved into what NAMI is today. But personal experience is at the heart of it. And what we also believe is that everybody is affected somehow. Even if it's not in your family, I suspect it is, but you just may not know it, or it may not have been identified yet, but we're all affected. Even if it's a colleague or someone in your neighborhood. With 1 in 4 adults being diagnosed with a mental illness, we're all affected. We also believe firmly that the trauma of having a mental health condition can be turned into positive action, and that anybody who wants to support other people should have the opportunity. What we've learned through years of doing peer-led programming in communities is that the people who lead the programs, who teach the classes, who facilitate the support groups, who share their stories, get as much out of those presentations and those leading those classes as the people taking it. We're all constantly learning from each other. And I think that's one of the unique nuances about peer support, whether it's family peer support or that for individuals, is that the person providing the peer support is getting support themselves. So again, it's just really cool how that works. We also know small groups of passionate people can do amazing things. And I think you've heard some of that today. If you go to the next slide, please. You may hear the term, if you poke around NAMI's website, or if you've been involved with a NAMI organization, you may hear the term NAMI National Signature Programs. NAMI has a lot of different programs that we do. There are a lot of different resources that can be downloaded on our website, and you can just grab it and go, turnkey type materials as I refer to them. But we also have a stable of what we refer to as our signature programs. These are programs that are evidence-based. We have research that shows that they make positive changes in people's lives. They're all peer-led. I feel pretty safe in saying we have the most evidence-based peer-led programs of other organizations. It's hard to get the research on programs that are led by peers, and Dr. Hogewood helped us with some of that with Basics years ago. But we very much believe at NAMI that through our programs, we can help change lives while we wait on the world to change. While we wait on the policies to catch up, while we wait on systems, cracks in systems to be filled in, if you will, we believe that NAMI can help change lives through peer support in a variety of different flavors. We're going to talk about education specifically. And if you'll go to the next slide, please. NAMI's programs, I mentioned earlier that our goal or our belief, one of our core values, is that anybody who wants to share their story, to share their journey, to share what they've learned with others should have an opportunity to do it and should have the tools to be able to do it. I can't tell you how many people I've trained for one of our programs who we always ask, why are you here? What do you want to get out of this training? What do you want to do with it? And to a person, almost everybody, one of the reasons they list is, if I can make one person's life a little bit easier, if I can help them save one hurdle or save one step that I had to take that I shouldn't have had to take, it will be worth it. That will make my life better. We hear that frequently. So all of our programs that are referred to as signature programs, and I'll have a list of some of them on the next slide, they're designed so that anybody who wants to do it can do it. The support groups, we have a support group model for family members of people with a mental health condition. We have a support group model for individuals who have a condition themselves. You don't have to have a diagnosis. We don't ask you what it is. We don't ask for confirmation that it is. We trust if you're coming to one of our support groups, you belong there. And what our model does is train the people who are going to be leading the group how to lead the groups in a consistent way, how not to give advice, how not to, it's almost about as much about how not to as it is how to do something. but we train people who have the heart, the passion, and the lived experience how to use those skills to provide support to others in the support groups. Our education programs are all curriculum based. If I could pick up one of my manuals without throwing my back out, I would, but our manuals are huge. We tell people, we have written out for people blow by blow what to do, what to say, how to run exercises, how to share the information, and all of our programs are a combination of sharing that we teach people about the biology of the brain. And then we stop and talk about how it was when we got a diagnosis for ourselves or for our loved one. So all throughout the courses, the lived experience is sprinkled in. What we know is that people don't know what they don't know, and they can't know what no one's told them. So frequently we'll have people call and say, all I need to know is about ADHD. I don't need to know all that other stuff. I don't need to take the whole course. You don't know that you need to understand just how typical it is to have a child with a diagnosis of something like ADHD. You don't know that you're not alone until someone tells you that. So we get people into the classes and they're structured in such a way that they're learning those things about themselves while they're learning the concrete information. And the majority of that, the magic of it, Joyce Berland, who started NAMI's programs, hated when I called it magic. But the magic of all of our programs really is that lived experience. I wrote the words for the NAMI Basics course, but the parents that we've trained to lead the classes are the ones who make it real and who make it meaningful and powerful for the people who take the course. There's an intense 2-day training. So even though we consider ourselves informal peer support, we're pretty intense about how we do it. And it's as much for wanting to make sure that people who take the classes and come to the support groups have a good experience. That's a big part of it, but we also want the people who genuinely want to lead these programs to feel confident and safe doing it. Many of the people who lead our programs have GEDs. You know, we have at least one pediatrician that I know of that teaches NAMI Basics, and she never tells people when she's teaching the class that she's a pediatrician. She identifies as the mom of her son. So it's really an integral part of what we do, that magic of the lived experience. We also at the national level provide technical assistance on a regular basis with the people who've been trained to lead the programs. And again, other than the support groups, all of our programs have been determined to be as evidence-based. If you'll go to the next slide, please. This is just a quick slide of our 5 different education programs. Again, this isn't everything we do. These are the 5 signature education programs. Basics is for parents of children and adolescents. I wrote that program. Family to Family is for any family member. And remember, that's a broad term, family member, but it's for anyone who has a loved one with a mental health condition. NAMI Homefront is for family members and caregivers of service members and veterans. Peer-to-peer is taught by, well, and it's important, I didn't say it, but Basics is taught by people whose children, even if your child is 30 now, they were symptomatic as a young child. Because as you heard Crystal and Kyler say earlier, it looks different when the child is young. And what we know still is that the younger the child is symptomatic, the more stigma there still is for parents. It must be something you're doing wrong. So it's Basics. It's important to us that it be taught by people who have children who were symptomatic before they were 13. Family to Family is taught by trained family members. Homefront is taught by family members who are also family members of veterans. Peer-to-peer is for people with a mental health condition, and it's taught by people with a mental health condition. And Provider is our course that we teach for healthcare providers. It's taught by a family member a person with lived experience of mental illness, and a healthcare provider who is also either a family member or has a mental health condition themselves. And what we're really teaching healthcare professionals is how to be culturally competent, how to be person first, and how to be collaborative. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So because I'm expecting my text any minute. Oh, there it is, Dana. I just looked at my phone and my 5-minute warning was there. I'll be quick. So this is just a rough outline of what the 6 classes are in basics. Again, I think you get the gist of what NAMI's informal peer support is, but I wanted you to see that there's a structure. And if you'll go to the next slide. The key principles of all of our courses are that this is nobody's fault. This isn't something you did wrong or you didn't do. There's a biological, a psychological, and a social component to all mental health conditions, whether you're a child, an adolescent, or an adult. Trauma-informed care is critical. I frequently say NAMI was doing trauma-informed care before that was the cool thing to do, because we started teaching 30 years ago that having a mental health condition in your life, like any other serious condition, can be traumatizing in and of itself. And we're all about the collaborative model of care. It takes the provider working with the family, working with the school. It takes all of us. And if you'll go to the next slide, please. And you'll get these slides, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each one of them. But again, these next few ones just go a little bit more into our model about the trauma learning. If you'll go to the next one, please. Again, we don't often know what we need to know. So one of the things we tell new leaders when we're training them is sometimes the people who are in your class really want to be anywhere but with you. You know, if I wanted to take a class, I probably wouldn't choose to take it on how to take care of a child with a mental health condition, but I don't have a choice because my child has a mental health condition. So we're open and honest about that in the classes. We meet people where they are. This is tough. If you'll go to the next slide, please. Again, some of the techniques that we use, not going to read these to you. We teach people about the biology of the brain. We also teach about different medications, not to be afraid of something, but not to assume you have to do something, whether it's medications or a type of therapy. We help people learn to make informed decisions about how to talk to their provider, how to advocate for themselves. I, more than many of you in the room, was very much raised in the generation where you don't question the doctor, you just do what they say. We help people understand the importance of advocating for yourself, and especially advocating for your child, because you're the best advocate they're ever going to have. We help people with coping skills. How do you deal with what's going on? How do you take care of yourself while you're taking care of the person that in your life that has the challenges? And you can't pour from an empty cup. We help people with that guilt, because everybody comes into our classes and support groups with that guilt. We let them know it's okay. You have to take care of you or you can't take care of anybody else. If you'll go to the next slide, please. We help normalize thoughts, you know, that we talk about things that it's other people don't talk about anywhere. You know, how scary is it? You know, how embarrassing is it when your child has a tantrum at the grocery store or wherever else? We talk about the things out in the open that you can't talk about anywhere else because everybody in the room gets it. We help people understand that the symptoms are real. It's not something that you as a family member are over exaggerating. The support and group wisdom, the next to the last one, is probably the most important, most powerful component of all of the programs. It's that peer support, learning that you're not alone, that other people have lived through this and you probably will too. And it never fails when people come to a class or a support group and we're sharing stories. There's always someone in the room who's in a little bit more dire situation than you, and always somebody who's doing a little bit better than you are. We're all constantly learning from each other. If you go to the next slide, please. The comfort of being read to. Our education programs are all done lecture style. We get feedback on that. Usually the feedback we get at the end is, gosh, I hated being read to, but I don't know how else you could have done it other than that way. We teach people to lecture the material. A big part of that is, remember, we want anybody to be able to teach the brain biology session, even if they just have a GED. That's okay. We want them to have the tools. We also know that it is so empowering for people to be able to share this information. And if you will go to the next slide, please. Again, we're all about providing an opportunity or a conduit for people to provide support to each other. Many of NAMI's programs are used as part of the state peer support credentialing process, either part of getting ready to take the certification exam or part of the hours of continuing supervision or practice that people have to have before they're credentialed. I hope that NAMI programs will be just as involved as the family support movement grows, the family peer support movement. And with that, Dr. Hogewood, I will hand it off to you.
Thank you, Terry. And thank you to NAMI and to the National Federation and SAMHSA for putting this on. It's really my pleasure, my treasure, to be able to share some of the knowledge about family peer support, but to do so with people who are actually doing this work on a daily basis. I also just want to take a moment that NAMI and National Federation coming together in this way is quite unusual. It's really important. This is the way change happens. And I am so committed to this field that I think we need to have family peer support everywhere, every community. So I am Kimberly Hogewood. I am a professor at New York University. I am also with New York State Office of Mental Health. So I've had a foot in both academic research and policy environments for many years. And I have been I've had the pleasure of working and doing research on family peer support now for about 20 years, doing so with people from whom I learned so much. And I also want to thank Kyler and Crystal. You are exactly the kinds of voices that are so important to be heard. Next slide. I want to talk about why research matters. And one of the reasons it matters is that research provides the data that can be used to shape policy, and that can be used then to create funding for the services that are known or found to be effective from research. So it's a really important component of making change happen at broad levels, at state levels, at community levels, and health system levels, so that the effective services, family peer support being an example of that, can actually reach more families. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that are driving the increase in family peer support across the country. I'm going to talk about research, as I said, some policy initiatives, a little bit on training and credentialing models. The National Federation has such. There are a number of states that have training models. And so more and more you're seeing that there is a sort of solidity to the definition of what family peer support is. And that's important because it enables then for billable services. It enables Medicaid to be able to bill, or providers to be able to bill Medicaid for delivering family peer support. And so that helps to create more sustainability. That's happening now across the country in the majority of states. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about implementation challenges. Next slide. So this is simply a map, simply I say, it's a map of all of the counties in the United States. So it's not quite so simple. But the main thing to pay attention to is that we have a major shortage of people who are able to provide mental health services. The white colors, the white counties, are ones where there's ample resources in terms of enough providers to provide mental health services. The blacks and the grays indicate there's completely inadequate numbers. The reason that's important is because this is one of the drivers for attention to family peer support. There are not enough clinicians, there are not enough counselors, there are not enough psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, and yet the needs are very much there. And so in many ways, family peer support is getting a spotlight shined on it right now because this is seen as an area where peer-to-peer work can fill the gap, can be able to provide services when there's nobody else around. Next slide. There are several types of peer support, and one of the things that's challenging in doing research in this area is that our terminology is kind of slippery and a little sloppy, frankly. But basically, there are 3, maybe 4 different categories of peer support. There's families or caregivers as peer support specialists. That's what Terry was just talking about. So these are people, these are parents or family members who have raised a child with a mental health problem, have had that lived experience. There are also adult behavioral health peers. Some of them came out of substance abuse system or adult mental health systems, and there's a whole cadre of adult mental behavioral health peers with certification, with credentialing across the states. An emerging area, which I find really exciting, is youth and young adult peers. These young people are taking the bull by the horns, and they're saying, we're going to learn from what else exists in the peer support literature, but we're going to develop our own models, our own credentials, our own ways of training the sort of the next generation. That is really, really cool. There is a 4th one that I won't be talking about, but it's community health workers. And in a sense, community health workers have a different kind of lived experience. They're lived experiences from the community. But you also will see more and more attention to the role of community health workers in delivering services. Next slide. Anytime you write a research grant or you write a paper about this, you're often asked to talk about the why. Why does family or why does any kind of peer support work? And what's the theory behind it? And so there are about 3, many more, but 3 primary theoretical foundations that underlie peer support and that give you a sort of map on why it's working, why it could work or should work. Social support theory is basically that emotional, instrumental, informational support make people feel better, that provides buffers against the stressors. And so it's that we are social animals. We've heard that before. We all need each other in some way or another, and that provides a buffer. The second one, social learning theory, came out of many years of work going decades back, basically saying that if you're looking for what's going to make change happen, you have to look at different factors that will affect that. One factor is if you're trying to change, let's say you're going on a diet or trying to deal with some addiction. One will be, is this a good fit? Does it make sense to me as a person? So is there a sort of emotional fit there? Another is, are my peers doing it? Are people who I respect or people I know or people in my peer community doing this thing? And that is a strong motivator. So that's another theory that you often hear referred to. And then the third is the social comparison theory. Simply interacting with people who are in the same wavelength, who have had the same experience, can give you a sense of hope. I feel this is a really important one, and I see it happen over and over again, that if sometimes they're even called near peers, if you can get through whatever you're getting through, whether it's suicidal thoughts or whether it's an addiction problem, if you can get through it and you're kind of like me, then maybe I can too. And so it imbues people with a huge sense of hope. It's very powerful. Next slide, please. Myself and my team, primarily my team, which, by the way, has included all 20 years of my work, family peer advocates who work side by side with me, doing the research with me, keeping keeping the projects honest. And so as a team, we have looked at the literature over the years, and there are basically 5 categories of support that tend to be studied. One is just information. And Terry's describing the NAMI basics. That's a really, really important component, because people often are lost in the mystery of what is mental health, what is mental illness, what does my child have, what does my family member have. So information is a critical one. Skills development is a very important one when you're talking about a peer providing support to somebody else. How do you do that? It's not enough to just have a big heart and to have compassion. You actually have to have some skills to know, when do you tell your story? When is that not so helpful? When is it helpful? What is my role? And if I'm part of a team, what is my role vis-a-vis other people in the team? Those kinds of issues are really important in terms of developing skills for this. Emotional and affirmation support in our studies, this one is always carrying the day. You know, that's what parents tell us matters the most, is they were not being judged, they were being supported, they felt as though they were understood. And that is a huge healing process. Fourth is instrumental support, helping with, what are the directions to this place? How do I get there? Is there a bus line, et cetera, just the practical stuff. And then advocacy support, teaching people how to advocate for the services to which they're entitled or which they need for their loved one. Next slide, please. There is a research evidence that is growing. It has grown over the past 20 years that I've been involved in this work. This whole movement came out of the passion of family members saying, we want to support each other. We need to support each other. We want to get the right help for our kids, but we need to also look out for ourselves, or we won't be able to help our kids. So it came out of the community. The research evidence has followed, and it has strengthened over the years. So there is a lot of evidence now that family support can reduce stress for those who participate in it, improve mental health, increase self-efficacy. And that's an important one, because that, again, comes out of social learning theory. If somebody feels as though they can do something, damn, they can do it. That sense of competence, that sense of, now I know what to do. Now I know what questions to ask of my pediatrician or teacher or social worker. Now I know what the next steps are. So that sense of self-efficacy is really powerful. And that's what peer support seems to help promote. And then it also keeps people in services, and we would like to think it keeps them in the good services, not the bad ones. So you're engaging it when people have gone through family peer support. Now they know what services to stick with, because if you don't stick with it, you can't reap the benefits of it. Next slide. It can also help caregivers recognize system level supports. And what we're talking about more and more now in the current context is changing the system. As Terry said, we really don't have a system. And that's true, unfortunately. But there are a lot of attempts at the federal level. The National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine is about to issue a report on healthcare system transformation. So if we really want to make changes at a system level, that is going to require the concerted effort of everybody, and that includes family peer support specialists. Next slide, please. The research evidence is, as I say, is quite ample, and it is showing that family peer support improves the caregiver mental health and self-care, and that's a really critical component. It can increase caregiver empowerment. It also can then improve the child's outcomes. That's sort of the next step. You can say, here's family peer support. Does it help empower, engage, activate the caregivers? And that's wonderful. And the answer is yes, by and large, it does, these kinds of programs. Does that then translate into helping the child? Well, the research is mixed on that. Because that's a pretty big leap. And there are some family peer specialists who are good friends of mine who say, don't even ask about that. We're not worried about that. We want to make sure that family peer support is helping the families, is helping the caregivers themselves. There are others that say, well, if you want to bill for it, then you better see if you can find that next step and actually see improvement with kids, or the clients, the loved ones. And in some cases you can. As I say, the evidence is mixed on that, and more work needs to be done. It does improve self-efficacy, improves emotional functioning, improves engagement in services. Okay, yes, so I have 3, 4, 5, about 7 minutes. Okay, I can do it. I can do it. Thank you, Dana. Next slide, please. So summary, the Center for Healthcare Strategies, and all the references are in my slides. I'm happy to share my slides, or I bet NAMI and National Federation will do so. Center for Healthcare Strategies did a really nice evidence review, a summary of family peer support research evidence. So if you're looking for one document that kind of summarizes all of it, this is a good one to go to. It's 10 years old, but it's still pretty up to date. There have been a few new studies since then. Not as many as we need, but there have been some. But this summarizes very well the kind of evidence that we have. Next slide, please. One of the good things about this moment in time is that, as I said, the research is getting more and more solid as we move along. At the same time, the federal government is paying attention to family peer support as a component of the service system that needs specific funding, that needs dedicated funding. And so you're seeing in more and more federal policies, federal programs, specific funds set aside for peer support. And I think this is really encouraging. We didn't have that 20 years ago. You talk about peer support and people's eyes would glaze over. That's not the case anymore. So there are this lists a number of the programs: the Mental Health Service Block Grant, the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinics, and that expansion. That's a huge expansion of the federal government, of SAMHSA in particular. And there is an NIMH, National Institute of Mental Health, grant cycle that's attached to it to try to improve the knowledge about implementing some of these novel and new and innovative programs like family peer support. The other thing that's really important to note is that there's bipartisan support for peer support legislation. I think that's critical, and it's important to keep nurturing that bipartisan support, because as we know, mental health and mental illness affects everybody. Doesn't matter what it doesn't play partisan politics. It affects all families at some point. And so there is bipartisan support for this, and that's a really good thing. Next slide. States are also picking up the mantle, and there are state credentials. We have one in New York, where I've been doing most of my work. Maryland, a lot of states have them. 40 states now have a certification process, which means if you have lived experience, if you go through training, you can get a credential saying you've got some expertise here and you are ready to share it, and hopefully to get paid for it if you're in a formal peer support role. So I think that the credentialing is really important. The funding for this, the being able to create billable services that can enable providers to actually draw down the funds for family peer support, is also growing, and it's a very important development. And again, this wasn't true a few years ago. Next slide, please. Implementation challenges. So research on the effectiveness of services, which is something that NIMH has funded for many years, has identified a lot of both treatments and prevention programs, and now more and more family support services, family peer-to-peer support services, as a particularly effective model. And that's wonderful. But it doesn't matter if you can't get it into the hands of people that can take advantage of it. And that means states have to get it into their training programs. The workforce has to incorporate this. And so there are various challenges to actually getting this work used in a widespread way, having it scaled up. Some of this has to do with the amount of turnover that there is. Often family peer support providers, they may be underpaid. They often are underpaid, unfortunately. There's often not a career ladder, although that's changing in a few states. But where do you go if you start off doing this work, let's say with a team? And who's going to supervise you? What's going to be your next career step? Mapping that out is something that's happening now, as I say, in a few states, but we have a long way to go. There's not an agreement on national standards. Different states have different training models, a lot of overlap, and it would actually be an interesting project if anybody's looking for a dissertation to look at the different credentials for peer-to-peer work and see where is the overlap and where do they differ. Peer support mechanisms of action, that is what makes it work, are not well understood. And we don't have a real economic model for the design architecture and the costs of expanding this. So how much does it cost if a community says, we want to make this the centerpiece of what we're doing for our kids and our families in our community? Well, how do you do that? How much is it going to cost? What are going to be the cost offsets? So a lot of challenges. I think one of the big ones, and I started talking about workforce shortages as a driver for attention to family peer support, and that is all true. But I think it's really important for us not to get too caught up in that as the primary argument for why family peer support is important. Certainly, it can address some of those gaps in workforce and providers. But to me, there's a more important message here, which is providing family peer support is improving the quality of the services and the system. If you don't have that, you are missing a huge chunk of what is important in order to create healthy communities and healthy families. So it's an absolutely critical component, and it's important in terms of the quality of the services and the service system. Last slide, I think. Next slide, last slide. Yeah, there we go. So I often turn to Neil Postman for wisdom. He's no longer with us, but he talked about technology and how it affects our way of thinking. And I think of family peer support as a kind of technology. Because it's a way of delivering services, if you just think of it that way. And what Neil Postman said is new technologies alter the structure of our interests. That is what we think with, or the things we think about. They alter the character of our symbols, the things we think with, and they alter the nature of community, the arena in which thoughts develop. And so I think as we continue to work in this area of family peer support, we want to think about it in different ways, not just in terms of stopgap measures to help fill in the gaps with workforce, but rather how does lived experience redefine our collective experience? How does it affect that? How does it redefine what it is to be a community, to be in community with others? And then how can health systems be redesigned to integrate a broader understanding of health, of functioning, and of living a meaningful life? And I want to go back to Kyler and Crystal and their opening comments, because to me, that is exactly what they were bringing to this whole webinar, was the sense of meaning. And that's what it's all about. I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hoagwood, Dr. Brister, Ricky, and Kyler and Crystal. We really, really appreciate everything you've shared with us. Kayla is showing us the references there. You'll see so many great studies that Dr. Hode was put together there for us. You will get these slides. And now if all of our presenters could come back on screen, we're going to come together and answer a few questions. I will tell you now, I don't think we're going to get to all of the fabulous, fabulous questions that we were asked today, but we're going to try as many as we can. And Kayla, you can take that slide down so we can just see the presenters up there. I'm going to start with one for Kyler and Crystal. If you want to put your video on there, folks. We had a question for you asking, how often do you address your own mental health compared to helping your son address his? And how do you find that balance between supporting him and supporting yourselves?
Okay, let me answer. So I attend therapy weekly. Kyler, it is tough. It's I mean, to balance it, that's a loaded question. I try, because I've learned through this whole journey, the better I am as, you know, the main provider, the better Luke is. So if I take what all of you have said is, if you take it personal or a failure on your parenting or how you are navigating this small human and take it as a judgment call on yourself, instead of seeing that it's a biological issue or a chemistry issue or we didn't make him autistic. We didn't make him behave in certain behaviors, but we can, through learning some things about ourselves or how to keep our anxiety under control, dealing with it. Like, there was a mention of the grocery store meltdowns. Oh, you know, I think a lot of those. We do not, he doesn't attend the grocery store lately, but we are going to work on, that's something we're going to work through therapy through. Do you have anything else to?
And honestly, what I learned is just his behaviors aren't to us. It's his neurology. He can't really help it. And so if you don't think of it, oh, he's, you know, being, you know, a bad kid to you, or, you know, like, or if he cusses and stuff, you don't take it personal. You have to accept that it's who he is and it's how he's going to live life, you know. So you just accept it, and then you learn your own coping skills. You learn your own.
But you can't do that without services.
Exactly.
Like I have a self-talk, or we pray a lot, and I do need that outlet for a professional, you know, not a friend, or for someone who understands what we're saying, to say, look, you're doing the best you can. It's okay. Or just to go in our office and cry. I do that a lot. But the hardest part of this was to not take it personal.
Exactly.
Like, that's a huge, huge part of it.
Yeah, and we had therapy a lot with him as a family, and that helped as well. Not just for him individual or us individual, as a whole family itself is what's helped us a lot as well.
Amazing. And I just heard such a direct connection to what Dr. Hodewood is saying about the biggest impact of family peer support is that affirmation and that feeling like I'm okay, this is normal. That's so impactful. Thank you so much, both of you. Ricky, the next question is for you. We had someone ask, how can other peer-run agencies network with you? So I think they're talking about adult peers, youth peers. How can they connect with family peers? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, first of all, happy to network and talk with other agencies. It's part of what we believe in most in our organization, is collaboration and partnership. So we have worked with other states to help develop some of the needs they have and worked alongside them. And you're welcome to reach out to me, rharris@tnvoices.org. But with that said, we do a lot inside our network in Tennessee with adults, transition age youth, and family peer support. We have them in multiple settings. So there's folks that work with hospitals. There's some folks that partner in crisis services, and there's this there's this intertwined connection of peer sports across our state, but our tentacles are going beyond Tennessee, most recently in helping some of our states develop their own trainings, develop their own models for supervising peers, all the things. So we would love to network with you all. If you're interested, shoot me an email. Don't hesitate. Happy to talk.
Excellent. Dr. Brister, the next question is for you. We had a couple of folks ask about how to get connected to some of those programs that you were talking about in their own states. If their state or their local affiliate doesn't have a program, is there any other way for folks to get involved in NAMI's programs?
So pre-COVID, the answer was no, because pre-COVID, all the experts, including this one, thought this stuff wouldn't work if you did it virtually. It only works if you're in the same room with each other face to face. Well, we all learned a lot, right? So surprisingly for me, probably more than half of our education classes are still taught via Zoom, because people just prefer it that way. So, and I've messaged some of this in the chat. The way to find a class is go to NAMI.org, and you can /local. Anyway, it'll tell you to find your local NAMI. And theoretically, you go to your local NAMI and classes are listed. I'll tell you, they're not always current. Many of our affiliates are run by volunteers, as you can imagine, and they don't always keep the website updated. But I put my email in the chat and I'll list it again. It's tbrister@nami.org. And if you don't see something on the website, if you'll email me, I'll get you connected. Because one of the beautiful things about the pandemic is that we are now and doing these classes via Zoom is, for example, with family to family, we may have a mom and a dad and a sibling who live in different states that are taking the same family to family course together. So we have a whole lot more options. And there were people typing in from rural Illinois. There may not be an area that's nearby to you, but we can get you in another class being offered. And a lot of classes start up in the fall around back to school. So please feel free to email me.
Perfect. And Katie put in the website where you can find the local NAMI, and I just put in a link to find your local National Federation of Families affiliate too. So check both of those out. Thank you so much. The next question is for Dr. Hogewood. Someone was impressed by all of that peer support research, but noted that most of it seemed like it was published before 2019. Are there new research articles that can be referenced? What's the state of peer support and family peer support research right now?
Yeah, good question. So two answers to that. One is that there's a lot going on in family peer support outside of mental health. So my focus has been on mental health, but if you look at aging, diabetes, early childhood, any kind of, and a lot of different health conditions, there are a number of studies that are being done on family support. And I think there are a lot of models out there that we might be able to import. So that's number one. Number two is there have been about a dozen, well, I'll pull that back. It's about 8 or so papers since 2019, just in the past 5 years, that are looking at different aspects of family peer support that I think are really exciting. One is testing out an assessment instrument called the Family Journey Assessment to be able to look at the changes that happen for families that receive peer support. And so that's a published work that comes out of many decades of work, and I think a sample of over 400 families, showing the way in which to measure and the kinds of changes that you can expect. So that's really important. A second one is the study that Terry talked about. I was involved early on with it, but Sarah Kate Bierman from University of Texas and her colleagues did a randomized trial of NAMI basics versus a waitlist control. And that's published in, I think, Terry, it was Psych Services, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, it's a important study, and that is one of the few that is actually the sort of gold standard design randomized controlled trial. And then there's a third one that I think is also noteworthy in child abuse and neglect, showing that in that system, which again is different from mental health, but in that system, parents who received peer support were more likely to reunify with their kids. Those are really important studies. It was a systematic review. So those are just a smattering of it. There's some other work that's being done for Black families in particular. So we're seeing some work in that direction. And then the last thing I'll mention is that the youth peer support, so young adults under the age of 30 who are delivering services as peers to other young adults. We just did a review of the literature on that, looking at 10 years worth of studies looking internationally, and found 34 randomized trials of youth peer support. And so to me, there's a lot going on, and we just need to keep our eye on it and keep pushing for more funding to do more research.
Amazing. Well, we are out of time. Unfortunately, we have so many great questions, but our presenters have been kind enough to offer to answer some of those via email. So you will get some more answers if your question was not answered live. Look out for that email with the slides. And we have about 3 minutes left. So right before we sign off, I'll give it back to Nashbit, but round robin, 30 seconds. Why is family peer support so important to you? We'll start with Kyler and Crystal.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay. Because we wouldn't be where we're at without it. Our son wouldn't, yeah, point blank. Our son wouldn't have been able to navigate to the point he's at now. We wouldn't have been able to navigate to the point we're at right now.
Ricky, why is family peer support important to you?
Oh, because there's not a more passionate provider than one who has walked in your shoes.
Amen.
Terry.
I had such a good one in my brain and it's gone. But so quickly, I would say it makes it survivable for other parents, which makes life better for our kids.
Absolutely. And Dr. Hoagwood.
Wow, so much to say, but I think because it helps others and helps yourself, that it's an example of reciprocity and mutuality that is really beautiful and miraculous and healing.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. Your expertise was very impactful and invaluable, and I'll pass it back over to our colleagues at NashBit.
Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you all to our attendees for joining us today. That does conclude our presentation, and you may now disconnect.